the National Book Critics Circle, where John Reed and I are on the board, and co-sponsored by this great store, the Park Slope Barnes & Noble. And any books that you buy in the whole store, when you're paying at the register, if you say that it's for the Penn American Center Book Fair, they will donate 10% of everything that you buy to Penn American Center's Emergency Writers Fund. So anything in the whole store, say that. And also, we're a bookend of the Brooklyn Book Festival. And Talia, where are you? Oh, Talia's here. If anybody wants any information, this Sunday, they have amazing events right around here from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and a list of all the events at the Brooklyn Book Festival.
And
so,
an iPhone and Android app.
What?
An iPhone and Android app that you can download.
Okay, an app that you can download. That's great. So we have one mic, so we're going to pass it around. So I thought maybe I'll just introduce everybody quickly, and then we'll get better introductions. So sort of in alphabetical order. So Luke Degnan is a poet, a musician, and the books editor for Bomb magazine. He created and curates Phone In, a poetry reading by phone podcast, and has worked at Juked, West Wind Review, and Word Riot, among other places. And next to him is Michael Miller, who's actually also on the board of the National Book Critics Circle, and he's been an editor and writer at the Village Voice Literary Supplement, Spin, and Time Out New York. He's currently an editor of Bookforum magazine. And next to him is David Propson, who is an editor on the books pages of the Wall Street Journal, and he's formerly a deputy editor of The Week and culture editor of New York Sun. And Parul Sehgal, next to me, is a staff editor at the New York Times Book Review. She was formerly the books editor at NPR and a senior editor of Publishers Weekly. She was the recipient of the 2011 Nona Balkin Citation for Excellence in Reviewing from the National Book Critics Circle. And next to me is Rob Spillman, who's the editor and co-founder of Tin House, a fantastic literary magazine that's 14 years old and bi-coastal in Brooklyn, New York, and Portland, Oregon. And Tin House has been honored in the Best American Short Stories, Best American Essays, Best American Poetry, O. Henry Prize Stories. And he's also the executive editor of Tin House Books and co-founder of the Tin House Literary Festival. And also the editor of an anthology, The Fantastic Woman, 18 Tales of the Surreal and the Sublime from Tin House here. And I'm Susan Shapiro, and I'm a journalism professor at the New School and an author of mostly memoirs, nonfiction, and have been on the board of the National Book Critics Circle with John. So I know I have a lot of students here and a lot of people that want to break into book reviewing. So what I thought is, let's start with Luke, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your publication, Bomb. And I think this audience is mostly interested in, are there any specific places or ways to pitch where you might be open for a freelance, for a freelance writer? So I'm going to pass the
mic. Hi. Hello. Hey, I'm Luke. I work for Bomb magazine. I'm the books editor there for the web.
Can you tell us a little bit about Bomb for people that
Yeah, we have been delivering the artist's voice since 1981, obviously not on the web. So we have a print magazine that's an Arts Quarterly, and it comes out, of course, 4 times a year. And then for the blog, we've been delivering the artist's voice since 2009. We started out just as a group of interns working for the print side, and we decided to start the website. What I'm looking for is, I'm always looking for new writers. Right now, I'm most interested in interviews with critical introductions or longer pieces that would normally not be thought of as something that would be on the web. The web is normally thought of as something that where there's short, pithy articles, but I've been looking for longer things. What else was there?
Was it fiction and nonfiction?
Fiction and nonfiction, a lot of poetry.
And do you prefer if somebody's interested, do they pitch you and tell you about the book and combine it with 2, or do you want to hear about them and then you assign?
There's a little bit of both. Often pitches just come out of the blue, stable of writers that I already have, or I also have a large list of books that I want to have reviewed that I send out maybe about once a month to the writers that I have. But often just people somehow get my email address and just send me a random pitch, and if it's, they sometimes have the piece already written, and I look it over and see, you know, how it is, if it's good, or they'll have an idea and we'll just sort of roll with it from there, and they send previous writing, things like that.
And does it have to be, like right now it's September, are you looking for, books that are coming out in November, December, or are you looser if it's, for example, a small press book that didn't get much notice, would you be open to running later?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah. Normally with the list, it's all books that haven't been released yet, but yeah, just what you said. So if it's a small press, normally we're pretty loose with that.
Good. And Michael Miller, could you tell us about Bookforum?
Sure. Bookforum is a book review. It has book reviews and essays, columns. It comes out every 2 months. I think it's been around for about 19 years. It's the standalone book review for Artforum magazine. So we cover some art books, but we cover mostly fiction, politics, nonfiction. And what do I look for in a review? Or how do I find reviewers?
If somebody in the audience, for example, or student was, of course they would go read a whole bunch of book forums and read your work, so that they're coming to you really well informed. But so do you want a pitch of upcoming books, or do you want somebody to just on spec write a book piece? Or,
Right. There are a few different modes in which I assign. I mean, one is for the print version, the print version of the magazine, and a lot of that, those decisions are made largely by the editors. Like we have a staff, we have a stable of writers that we kind of reach out to. We kind of choose the books that we want to cover, and we reach out to our writers to see if they're interested in covering them. But the way that we sort of build that stable is occasionally we'll draw from web writers, and I think that for us that's the best way to break in if you've never written much before. There isn't a lot of lead time for the web. I'd say at least a month before the book comes out.
so right now, people should only be pitching you October, November.
Yeah, but that depends a little bit too. I mean, if it's going to be a big book, we want to be a little bit ahead of the curve there. But if it's a sort of smaller press book that isn't necessarily going to get a lot of attention, I'm happy to run something even after something's come out. I mean, it really sort of depends on the quality of the pitch, and it does help to have clips, but I don't know. I don't really know what I look for in a pitch, but it's sort of.
You know it when you see it.
I know it when I see it, and.
How long would a pitch be? Like a couple paragraphs?
No,
just
shorter.
Okay.
And I would say that it doesn't hurt sometimes to just write a review and send it in. I mean, if you're really ambitious about doing it, I can see how that might be frustrating, and that you might just, you might not get a response. I mean, I know a lot of editors get swamped with emails, but I don't know. I mean, I think that at least for the website, I find that sometimes it's great to just find a review that's in really good shape and that's a new writer, and then I don't have to go through the experience of saying sure, do it, and have it come in and go through the edit and stuff like that. Find out that it's not exactly what I wanted. Although I don't really know what I want before it gets there, but when it shows up, sometimes it doesn't quite work out. So.
Good, and David Propson, I know the Wall Street Journal has a relatively new standalone book section that I've been reading, and it's been very impressive. And of course, I noticed that there's very big authors who are writing for you. So, if you were going to be open to a new writer, would it be somebody who would have a special expertise, for example, and pitch you a book that you might not know about, a small press book? I mean, obviously, if you don't have clips, somebody's going to write and say, hey, I want to review the new Philip Roth. You're not going to say yes, right? So is there anything like that you can suggest?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's worth noting that we don't do. I that there is a lot of coverage in the journal that is interviews with authors or other types of pieces, and we don't do that at our book. The book review editors are not responsible for any of those things. We just commission book reviews. Now it is possible, you can find the people who would commission interviews either in the Greater New York section or in the Weekend Journal or various other places. But for us, it's straight book reviews. And it's also, if you look at our Saturday section closely, you'll notice that there isn't a lot of fiction that we review that is not done by a stable of columnists that we have. So it's really better to pitch us nonfiction. And we will work with other people on fiction, but it tends to be, again, as people become part of the stable and you sort of are comfortable with their sensibility and know where they're coming from, it's easier to get heard. And we are interested in smaller press books, and we actually like kind of discovering them and putting them before a lot of people who would otherwise never hear of them. In terms of pitching, though, it would be sort of a couple months out, looking at November books or even December books. And a related question to that is, I always had a problem when I was starting out knowing what books were coming out, and it's gotten a lot easier if you actually, because the book publishers now on their websites make the catalogs available. It used to be that you had to sort of, wrestle it out of someone. But if you go and look at Random House or some of the other publishers, you can actually look at what's coming out next spring. It makes that part of the job a lot easier because
Also, Publishers Weekly.
Exactly,
I think you can
yeah.
access some of it online in
Yeah.
the forecast section. So I have a subscription. If any residents want to steal mine because it's an expensive subscription. But at the back they have a forecast section, so you could go to the back and find hundreds of books that they're going to list that are coming out October, November, December, and they actually have special issues where they have the whole season in advance. So that's probably for editors who really care about the dates, the publication dates of books. Publishers Weekly, I think, is really important. It's a good way to learn too.
Right, yeah, and I think, I think that's about it. I mean, in terms of pitches, we try to keep it short, and probably it is helpful if there is some sort of evidence of a special expertise. On the one hand, when you're starting out, that might be something, sort of master's degree, something you've decided you don't want to study. Or something like that, but there are, and then there's always the risk of getting typecast in a particular area, but it is something that we pay attention to, and we want people to sort of either be well-read on the subject or get well-read on the subject.
I actually had a student who was obsessed with classic TV. He used to watch all the night reruns, and he presented himself as an expert to an editor at the Times Book Review on classic television. And it turns out there's a lot of books on that, so he actually wound up, based on a bad habit at 3 a.m, wound up getting
Right,
a book
exactly.
review.
And
So
sometimes,
a quirky habit sometimes.
yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's not the things you studied, it's the things that are sort of passions or interests.
Good. John Reed, tell us about Brooklyn Rail, and I know that you told my classes before that you're mostly interested in small presses and you don't really want people to be pitching you, Random House books that everybody else is reviewing. You're more interested in stuff that isn't getting covered.
Well, the Brooklyn Rail is, I guess it's 11 years old now, and it's a .org, so it's not making any money. We were paying people for a while, but we're not going to pay it now. And but the idea is you're going to get behind underdogs, and that you're going to get to write about some books that wouldn't get covered otherwise. I don't really feel that it's a responsibility. We do cover some gigantic books occasionally, but I don't really feel like it's a responsibility of a .org to do that. That said, you should look at the section because since we do focus on on a lot of those books, we're probably a little bit snobbier about which small presses we like. So I would look carefully at that.
You guys also do author profiles and Q&As.
Yeah, and we do a lot of those author profiles and Q&As, and because it is a print format, that means the word counts it's a newspaper. 10 issues a year. So if you're going for print, that means that the word count is going to matter. You're going to have to check in on that. We really don't do much in the way of synopsis because of that. You know, you've got to cram a lot of stuff into a few pages. It also means that the timeline is such that the books really have to be on time or close to it. I'm trying to push the section more online because I think we compete better there. The reviews can be longer. You don't need to. They don't need to be really, really recent books. That said, you can get those catalogs. There are a bunch of websites that just have all the publisher catalogs. You can scope ahead on Amazon. You can get them individually from any publishing house. They'll have forthcoming titles. They'll also have a PDF of the catalog. So all that information is definitely out there. I do think it's a good idea to volunteer if you send an email. To volunteer to look at, well, to volunteer to look at specific presses or to do interviews. We do a lot of interviews. And the online stuff, it's easier to crack that. And to be honest, I think a lot of that stuff is better. It has a better word count. 99% of the traffic is online. That's just, you know, 10 years from now, people will look back at this distinction and they really won't even understand it.
And John, do you like if there's a Brooklyn connection? So if it's a Brooklyn author, there's something in the book that's about Brooklyn.
I think it's good to have that, to have some kind of Brooklyn connection or a New York connection, but it's not required. On the other hand, I do get pitches on books, you know, published out of the University of Michigan that I just think are not our responsibility.
Thanks, Parul. I remember when a long time ago when I started reviewing for the Times Book Review, when I was actually in my 20s right out of NYU, what I did was I wrote a letter to an editor, and I had published some small pieces and poetry in a Jewish publication, and I used that as an expertise because I was told that with the Times Book Review that usually if you mention a book, you're not going to get assigned the book that you want, but just to sort of give the editor a sense of what your expertise is. But that was at the point when they were doing in briefs. So is there still, if somebody has an expertise, is it still worth it to pitch an editor and tell them about yourself, or to mention authors that you like, or is it really too hard, you know, for relatively new reviewers to break it?
Yes, we don't accept pitches, but I'm always looking for new authors. I read everything. I read every Tin House. I read every Bookforum, every Bomb magazine. I'm always looking for young people, especially women, especially people of color, like looking to make more diversity in this place. So we don't accept pitches, but what I do really do welcome is, you know, send me an email about yourself. If you have clips, please include them. You can see me include them. Nice, short, and sweet. You don't have to be too showy. It helps if you're familiar with the publication. I think this probably goes for all of us. Show us that you've read it and mention a recent review that you liked or a recent book that's come out that spoke to you. And so it is.
And what about the Julie Just, who used to do my panels, said that sometimes they would be open for the back page essay if you had a great idea, and she said that that was pitchable. Is that something that you do, or is there a specific editor in charge of it?
There's a specific editor who handles the back page, which is just like it's a column, it can be a riff, it's pretty open-ended, and that's something that actually, if you have the time and don't mind, it's something worth. You can write up a little pricey, but you can also actually write something and send it in.
Those are about 1,200.
Yes.
Who's the editor now?
County Hall is the editor. And we also we don't do it briefly, we do fiction chronicles and non-fiction chronicles, which are sort of capsule reviews of a bunch of books, and that's a good way to try out newer writers who are interested and get a sense of their style, get a sense of their
And Sam Tannenhouse did a panel with us a while ago, and he said that at the time they were thinking about doing online-only content for the book review that's not in the hard copy. Has that happened yet?
Not yet. It's unfortunate. That's why we are still so selective. I think we cover about 1% of the books that are still being.
Great, okay, Rob Spillman at Tin House, I know you have a column that I love that I did one for you, a book column called Lost and Found. So could you tell everybody about that?
We don't review current books. We do sometimes interviews with people who have books out, but we have a section called Lost and Found, which champions out of print or underappreciated books. It's a great way for the writers to slip into the magazine, and they're usually around 800 words, 800 to 1,200 words, and usually have a very personal angle, like why this book is so important to you and why everybody else should read it. So it's a very personal thing, and if you're pitching me, it's if I don't know you, it's almost better to write the whole thing and just send it to you, because they're so short, they're only 800 words. It's someone else said it's much harder to reject something that's right in front of you and fully formed and kind of perfect, versus like, oh, should I give this unknown person a chance? Because you're like, you never know how it's going to come in. But if it's airtight, you're like, oh, great. I also do a lot of things online and on a blog, which is a little more open-ended, and it's also a very, very great when you sort of get in. What we try to do is we're trying to foster a community and a dialogue, and so I have a lot of people who write just for my blog, and we have, again, be familiar with it. We have a section on championing favorite indie bookstores, and a couple times a month we do pieces that are very personal about why this great indie bookstore in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, is so great.
Would you also explain to people, so they can send you fully written poetry, fiction, essays, and excerpts from books? Can you tell us a little bit about that submission process?
We have an online submission manager called Submittable, and all the guidelines are in there. And it really does you very well to be familiar with the magazine. We get a ton of stuff that's just absolutely great, but not even remotely for Tin House. And I even get, every day I get pitches from big publishers about books that are coming out now. And I've in 14 years I've been running the magazine, I've never done a book review of a current book. And, so obviously the person has never picked up the magazine, they're just pitching wildly. You have a much better shot if you're actually pitching to one of us. And I think it's very helpful to picture yourself getting the pitch. Because we are all really nerdy book lovers who are socially awkward, and but have figured out how to be on this side of the table. We love to read and we love to get these pitches, but we're also human beings. We're sifting through a huge amount of stuff. So imagine yourself receiving a pitch, short, to the point, familiar with the magazine, and
Great. Okay, start on this end again. Luke, here's one of my favorite questions that I ask editors in my journalism classes. I have like 100 editors come every term. Best question. What should a writer never do? Like, if a writer does this, you'll never want to work with them again. And be really honest, because a lot of students who are just starting out have no idea that the email shouldn't start, "Hey, dude," So I mean, really be very specific. If because a lot of editors say, if you spell my name wrong, I'm not going to trust you with an assignment. And I know it's quirky too. Like, some people don't. Some people get idiosyncratic things that bother them. So what would totally bother you and make you not want to work with a writer?
Really, it's after we've already started working together mostly. I really dislike arguing about edits, so that's my job. So it's often
So if an author says you can't change a comma, you don't want to work with that person?
Well, that doesn't happen too often, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. I would also say, there are seemingly finding me on on Facebook and then sending me a message. But, you know, honestly, that's happened, and I've just been in the right mood and been like, sure, let's check it out. So most of the time when that happens, I just immediately ignore it, but I've actually published a few pieces just that somebody's randomly found me on Facebook. So it's just
So you would prefer somebody gets your email from and a pitch letter?
yeah, or you know, often at events, I'll just talk to somebody just in the audience and have an idea, and I'll just say, you know, send me an email, we'll talk about it, write it, and then we'll talk about it. That was an important thing that was mentioned a few times. I do prefer to get fully formed pieces as well. I think just if somebody's pitching and there's like a first time writing for me, here it is, check it out. I think that makes it easier.
It would be a review of an upcoming book, and like 800 words, 1,000 words.
You know, I don't really have any word count if it says what it needs to say.
Okay. Michael, what should people never do if they want to get into Bookforum?
Wow, I felt kind of bad suggesting that people send fully formed reviews in, but now everyone else seems to be agreeing that that's a great idea. So, I don't really look at emails and say like never. I'd say that one thing that bothers me, which to me seems pretty obvious, is if someone pitches me something that we've already run a piece about. It's pretty easy to look at the table of contents, which is online, and just to do a simple search. Yeah, I agree with Luke that if I do commission a piece and the edit is particularly time-consuming, that's annoying to me because I generally kind of feel like I'm a pretty give-and-take editor. You know, I make suggestions, and usually those suggestions are indications that whether my suggestion is right or not. Like the writer should sort of take into account that the passage that's been flagged needs a little bit of work. So I mean, time is limited, so I like it to be a smooth process. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's anything that makes me say that's not it.
Well, just because you said a lot of editors say that if you pitch me something that was on the cover last week, then that shows you're not reading the publication.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a sign that I don't know. I mean that almost seems like it doesn't even seem like that big of a deal, but maybe I feel like my ego gets hurt or something when I'm not reading Bookforum thoroughly. I don't know. But yeah, it's usually a sign that they're probably pitching a lot of places, and I just suddenly feel like one of the crowd or something. Anyway.
David,
well, maybe picking up on that point, and I don't know how much this has actually happened, but it has happened a few times, which is to not shop a review around necessarily, which also may mean that a pitch sits in my email for a while, and but if that's what I'm going to get back and say, yes, absolutely do that, and then you've pitched the same thing somewhere else and have decided, that you've made a promise to them, then that would kind of be a red flag for the future. And as far as that goes, I think there are pieces. If you pitch a place like the Journal, on a big book, it may be that it's better to look for someplace smaller to write about the big books and write about the small books for some of the larger places. Too.
Don't be a jerk. That sounds flippant, but the publishing world is a very small ecosystem, and you're trying to enter this ecosystem, and everybody up here knows each other, and we all talk, and we all ask each other for advice, and if we have something, a special issue coming up, we go, hey, do you know anybody, who really knows about Turkish literature, something like that, and if I've worked with you and you've been difficult from beginning to end, I'm going to go, Turkey, where's that? And if you've been pleasant to work with, just professional and courteous, I'm going to say, sure. And when I was first starting out writing book reviews, a lot of the work I got was by reference. You kept pitching, but you would you just kept building clips and building clips, and you could work your way up, but to be professional and courteous. So when you're pitching someone, you have to kind of look at it almost like courtship. You don't want to stalk, you don't want to be overbearing, and if you get a polite rejection, but pitch me more, it's take your time and really think about the response you're going to send back to them. So imagine it like a date. Like it's the equivalent of you had an okay date and you go home and you walk through the door and the phone's ringing. And you're like, psycho alert. So it's the same thing of getting the email like 10 seconds after you said, this isn't quite right, but in the future. It's much sexier if like 3 weeks later you go like, I thought about it, I've got this, and unless I say, send back right away. I mean, it just, think about it. And if an editor doesn't respond to your pitch, never send an email saying, like, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you replying to me? I get 20,000 submissions a year. So if I don't respond to you, it's gotten lost in the shuffle, and the fates were not with you. You've just got to, pitch me again, and I will respond. I have a 3-month response time, and it's okay to send a general reminder, but just be courteous and aware of that you're dealing with human beings, and that human beings we're all trying to do the best and get the most interesting thing out there, and we are all really looking for new, exciting voices. I mean, everybody up here, that's a great thrill to be able to introduce a great new voice. It's really exciting.
And a lot of editors say, if you send me something Tuesday and I get an email Wednesday saying, did you read it yet, that's bad, right? That's negative?
Because we might be on deadline, our kids might be sick, I mean, it could be anything.
So wait a few weeks.
Yeah,
Along with John.
Well, I'm going to say you don't need to send me full reviews, but I would like to see that you're published a bit. And I'm lately more about giving assignments. It's just because I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of what I'm looking at for the section, so I could direct you if you give me a little assistance. And in terms of this pitching, I feel like the thing you got to do is research who you're pitching, and not in a kind of glib way, to say, oh, I loved your piece on such and such, but to really engage the section. And most of the editors that you're going to be pitching will have published some pretty substantial pieces recently. And I had someone working on a book of mine in publicity, and she just took forever to do everything. She would take half an hour, before sending out one pitch, but she had a really high rate of return. She did not pitch people who were not going to be interested in that project. She read pieces of theirs and responded to them honestly and enthusiastically. That just really engaging that venue and that editor is, I think, going to give you a much better percentage.
There's a few chairs open here. Shani, if you want to come, there's a chair up here. If you want to come sit down. Shani, go ahead. Shani, are you here? You can come sit over here. Where are you? Yeah, you want to sit down over here? Okay. Great. Great. Parul, you've worked at, not only now are you at the Times, but you've also worked at NPR and at Publishers Weekly. There's one over there. Are there any other empty chairs? Raise your hand if there's any empty chairs. Oh, there's one over here. Great. So you've worked for 3 great places. So, is there anything across the board that you could, talk about in terms of what editors find alienating, or what you find alienating if people are trying to pitch you?
I think so much has been covered. I think don't be crazy. Just be polite, be warm. So much, like writing is tremendously lonely. But when you pitch somebody and you're getting ready to write for the publication, you're entering into this really interesting collaborative space. And I Like, we want to know that you're somebody, like, I want to know, I'm going to enjoy working with you, I'm going to enjoy editing you. You're not going to take edits personally, we can make it better together. That's how I like to work. So I really do think so much happens just in that initial email, initial interaction. And it's strange, but yeah, it's like every day or so I have like these odd and awkward encounters with people like, did you get my email? It's been a couple of hours. There's another piece, you know? And I actually happen to enjoy that kind of thing. That's awful. But yes, I mean, just be slow, be polished, and just be kind.
Good. I have a rule with myself and with my classes where I feel like if you are emailing someone and you want something, don't start with, hi, this is what I want, because I find that very self-involved. So I think you should always Google the other person that you want something from and at least pay respect. So, and I know some people think it's kiss-ass, but I feel like if somebody emails me and they're like, I just graduated Phi Beta Kappa and I want you to help me, and I've already deleted it because I don't know who you are and I'm tired and I have a lot going on. But the emails that start with, oh, I just saw your recent piece, or I loved your book, and then they say something intelligent, I feel like, all right, this person took the time and I know why they're writing me, and they're not just writing everybody in the world. And I have had the most luck with editors and agents by Googling them and finding out something that they're doing and writing the first few lines. And I know there's a lot of these books that tell you to jump right into your pitch, and I disagree with that. So that's my pet peeve, is I don't want to hear, if I don't know you and I don't know why you're writing to me, I don't want to hear all about you or what you want yet. Save it for the second paragraph. So that's my advice. Luke, could you tell us a story about somebody who contacted you and surprised you with a pitch or a review that worked? Is there anything specific that comes to mind? Something unsolicited.
I mean, once again, I think referring to the random Facebook message that I actually read, that was surprising. I mean, that was an instance where it was just an idea. It was a pitch for an interview.
Can you tell us what it was?
You know, I don't remember.
But it was smart. Like there was something about the pitch that just caught you.
The pitch, it was actually terrible. It was a terrible pitch. I mean, the wording, it was maybe 30 words. Hi, Luke. Are you interested in this? And I don't know, for some reason I said, yes, I am interested in this. So, I don't know. I mean, like what you were saying about how you think that people should, you know a little bit about you and stuff like that. I think that's nice. I personally, I don't care. If you tell me what you want to do, that means I don't have to read your email as long.
Good, Michael. Any particular pitch or author that you had that pitched you unsolicited either at Time Out or at Bookforum that you went better?
That I wound up using?
Yes.
I mean, at Time Out I use unsolicited pitches all the time. And I feel like it's cheating, but Parul was one of them.
Tell us, let's hear the story. Do you remember what the pitch was?
Yeah, it was a biography of Marquez, right?
And what about the pitch interested in you?
Well, I think that, and this what's that? Ale. Right. No, she was recommended to me by a mutual friend. So, Craig Morgan-Tiger, who worked with her at Publishers Weekly, but I will say that Craig pitched me unsolicited, and I used him as a reviewer, and so, it was sort of.
But what's getting your attention? Is it the pitch itself, or is it that someone has an expertise that you don't have?
I think with Craig, he pitched poetry, and poetry is very difficult to write about, and his pitch was very sort of conversational, and because Time Out had such a sort of conversational style, that I needed to have someone who could write about poetry in a sort of accessible way. And Craig had that, and so I used him, and then I got to know him. He lived in my neighborhood, and then he said, I work with this person, and she's really great. And I said, okay, and then Parul sent me a pitch, and I assigned her a review, and then here she is now. But yeah, I'd say that, Craig and Parul were both great.
Okay. David, did anything come up with the chance?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's one fellow that brings to mind who writes for us occasionally at the Journal and ends up writing on the public. He does write about fiction for us occasionally, and he came through someone we know,
But he did send an email that was one of those little scatter shots. Here are 6 books I would like to review. And I would probably not have, in fact, I kind of thought over it for a while before I went, and I followed up and said, well, as my friend Paul, tell me about this guy. And it turns out that, he's this amazing autodidact, has read everything and reads very quickly, and it's just a very peculiar skill. And also this is separate, but when I was at the New York Sun, one point our theater critic was coached by New York Magazine, and we were sort of, as the season was beginning to start, we had to hire a new person, and this was sort of thing that went on the news wires or whatever, and that morning I got a packet in my mailbox from someone, and I literally, was not having the best day, so I looked at it and you literally said, oh, come on, that's kind of desperate. And then after weeks, looking through different people, I actually went back to that packet, and that's the guy who ended up hiring. So, I don't know what the point of that anecdote is, other than, sometimes, it works.
Good, and John, I know for the Brooklyn Rail, we've let quite a few of my students break in. It's been their first clips. So if somebody sends you something, and you teach at the new school, so if someone says they're a journalism student or a literature student, are you open to reading?
Yeah, there are a few people here that I published for the first time. Mainly, I'm just looking for kind of sobriety. Very often, I'll break someone in by sending them out on a few interviews. And those are, for that, I just want to see that you're pretty capable. And those are just a drag. They get transcribed and all that, but I want
Like
to
an
see
author profile, you'll say, would you go interview this author of this new book and give me 1,000 words?
Yeah, usually when I start someone in the section, there is often a little bit of hazing. So if you volunteer for some not so good work in a place you haven't published before, occasionally that'll work out for you. I think years and years ago when I was trying to start getting some art reviews, I volunteered for a brutal group show for Art in America, which was something like 45 pieces, and the review was going to be 350 words. And I just figured they have to want this. Nobody's going to want to do it. If I volunteer to do it, they'll let me do it. And yes, indeed, that was the case. So you can sort of make yourself available for the not so good side.
And you take interns, right?
Yes, and we have a former intern here too, who is now, I think his title is one of the associate editors of the book section. And because their rail is a kind of old-fashioned place, people do rise up that way. They do end up with more responsibilities. They write for the intern, they write for the section, they edit for the section, they assign for the section. It's kind of nice to have that still in place.
Who's here?
David Varnum,
Oh, that's right.
Cool. Who I had editing stuff just today.
Yeah, thanks. David is taping us for the NBCC for our website. Parul, so you've been at NPR and at PW and now at the Times Book Review. Have you just ever gotten an unsolicited pitch that you wound up taking?
All the time, especially like and the pitches that impress me. And you have to, again, it's a matter of influence who you're writing to, you're writing for, and the Times and NPR are also just news organizations who want books that feel timely and relevant. And I got a few pitches at NPR, and one of it was it was a book of essays. I was just like, oh, it's this book. The review really wanted to do it. And we had this beautiful, really concise case in the email, like, look, the London Olympics are happening right now. This isn't the book that I would ordinarily pitch you, but I think they're relevant for speaking to how London's changing. They say something about empire. They say something, and it was just, and I read it and I was like, just spare me. I don't have to read this book. I don't have to look at it. I have to make this list of my balls. And he's like, why are you reading this book? This is well. So that kind of research, that kind of contextualization about why books are important, why you might want to review this book is very helpful.
So timeliness could be
Timeliness, and like let me know, like make a case to me why you should have a review this book, and here's why I'm the person who can write it.
great. Rob, you actually have amazing stories of people that I think that you discovered from over the transit. Can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, it's, well, especially fiction. You know, I with Victor Laval, I published his first story. I mean, not like that. I get
And Nick Flynn, you said?
Nick Flynn, I published him really early, and he was still grad school. But you know, for the, especially the lost and found section, I take unsolicited stuff all the time. And what I'm looking for is sort of familiarity with the magazine, but also to be surprised. Like one of my favorite pitches was not a book, but a collection of old journals. You know, this guy collects old journals that he finds at thrift stores and just kind of thrown away and at auctions. And so he did this really interesting piece with a lot of visuals of kind of lost journals of ordinary people. And it was, it kind of broke the mold of this section, but I could see how it could be shoehorned in. And it was really just a fun pitch. So I also like to be surprised. You know, I have this section, but it'd be great if you surprise me. And that I'm looking for that in nonfiction and fiction as well. I'm looking, you know, I love to go, oh my God, what is this? And I love to have all my pet peeves turned on their ear. Like I hate second person stories. I just have this real problem with them. Like, you were walking down the street, I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm reading your damn story, and I'm really pissed off. So all of my editors give me second person stories all the time. Every single second person story winds up on my desk just to mess with me. And of course, I wound up publishing a Jenny Egan story that wound up in Best American. So I love to be proven wrong and have to, at an editorial meeting say, okay, I admit it, you can use the second person.
Great. Most people that I know that started out, I did my MFA at NYU in 1981. A lot of us have had a lot of different jobs in both writing and editing and internships and stuff like that. So I was wondering, since I have a lot of students here that are either in undergrad or graduate, could you tell us about your background and how you got started? For example, Luke, what were you doing before you got to BOM? Or did you ever, were you an English major, literature major, and then did you do an internship? Like how did you get a job as a book editor?
I was actually a philosophy major and a bored bartender, just reading all the time, and decided I needed to do something else. So I started as an intern at BOM, and then just doing random things. Actually, I started selling ad space, and then I just didn't leave. I wouldn't leave. I just didn't. They were like, "Oh, hey, your time's up." I was like, "Okay," and just kept coming to work. And as the blog became more important to the senior editors, they realized that they needed to make staff positions for the main editor and for me and for an art editor. So that's my story.
And you write yourself, so did you decide that, especially with poetry, it's so hard to make a living, did you decide that you'd be better off having a full-time job by day and then writing nights and weekends? How did that work?
I think, the big poetry dollars don't really come, but it's not really different than having any other kind of day job with that. I think I just make time for writing when I can find time. So.
Well, actually, a lot of my students are like, okay, can you tell me a job? I'm 18 years old. I just moved here from Idaho. I need a $57,000 job. Writing. Could you tell me what to do? And I try to explain that there's all kinds of different ways to do it. And my husband and I actually both write by day and teach at night. So and we tried a lot of variations. So when you work at BOM, is it like a 9 to 5 regular editing job, and then you do your work nights and weekends? Your own work?
It's a little bit. I'm only there 3 or 4 days a week, so I have weekends. It sort of depends. Often I'll just write at night, pretty late into the night, and then show up to work late.
Good, Michael. So you've worked in a lot of different publications. So how did you started?
Yeah, I moved to New York in 1993, and I had a friend who worked that I was here, and I got a job answering phones. So I wasn't doing editorial work at first, but pretty quickly someone went on maternity leave, and I took the copy test, and so I started doing proofreading late into the night on the night that they closed, and then a position opened up in the copy department. I got a copy editing job, and then I wrote a few book reviews while I was there, and eventually I became an editor at the Voice Literary Supplement. I mean, I think that it's kind of I don't know if it really happens anymore because people don't really have copy editors or people who answer phones nearly as much as they used to. But that's how I got in.
And then where did you go from there? Was Time Out next?
I went from Time Out to Spin. No. I went from the Village Voice to Spin, and from Spin to Time Out to Bookforum.
And did you, were you interested in being a reviewer and an editor, or wasn't it by being an editor you could get published, publish all your stuff more?
Yeah, I guess I've always been interested in doing both, but I mean, the editing has always been what I've done consistently, whereas the reviewing kind of comes in fits.
David?
Yeah.
Out of school, what was your
Well, I was a journalism major in college, and I kind of backed into that. And I moved out to New York in 1998, and ended up working at some business publications. And this was the time when the .com boom was sort of booming. So I found myself relatively quickly writing, articles about corporations that I frankly knew nothing about, and getting paid $2 a word to do it, and I was like, this is kind of great. But I was also still interested in, the cultural coverage, and I started reviewing. I think my first book reviews were for a publication that may still exist called the New Jersey Jewish News, which was ironic because I am not Jewish, and I don't think I had been to New Jersey at that time. But I knew someone there, and they paid, and I started reviewing some books. And from there, I found people through, former professors or acquaintances, and got, some clips, wrote for places like the Washington Monthly and other places. And then at some point, the bottom fell out of my, day job, and around that time, the New York Sun was launching, and with what ended up to be, quite thorough cultural coverage, and I sort of just got in on the ground floor there of a job that required an awful lot of work, and I was sort of in a place in my life that I could do it, and after long hours of this sort of canonical, crazy startup publication, I found myself with, woke up and found myself, as a bookseller.
And there's actually a lot of people from the Sun that are now at the Journal, right?
That's right, yeah, because in terms of news, the business of news, there's not a lot of places to sort of get that experience anymore.
Yeah, I work with Ever since.
Right. Yeah.
He's open for freelancers too.
Right, and yeah, he's actually at the Greater New York section, which is a place where I think, author profiles and those.
John, how did you get started?
So I met the guys at the Rail. I was getting some media on a book, and it was like UK stuff, and they were attacking me, and the New York.
Oh wait, tell the story. That's a good story. So that was your
So
your novel was
this
getting
book,
trashed.
which came out 10 years ago, was we were getting threatened by the Orwell estate. It was a 9/11 update of Animal Farm, kind of a parody. And the UK papers were up in arms about it.
Did you say Christopher
one
Hitchens
US paper,
trashed
the
you?
New York Sun, but it was all in good humor, the New York Sun. But yeah, the Hitchens was at the Sun, and
The Boston Globe woman.
and the
She
Boston
asked you
Globe
without
I didn't like, because she reviewed the book without reading it, and I thought that was not copacetic. But the Rail, the New York Times, and basically the New York City papers kind of came to my defense. And the Rail was early to come to my defense. After that, I felt pretty warm towards those guys, and they were accessible. And they wrote me into doing some interviews, and then I wrote a few reviews for them. And then the paper expanded, and they wanted a book section. So that's how it happened.
And now you combine your own writing with editor job.
I think it's really healthy as a writer to have editorial. I think it makes you a better writer, gives you a kind of extroversion. You don't have to write about the things that you feel will damage you. I mean, if you're a poet, you don't have to write about poetry, write critical pieces about poetry. You could write about graphic novels or anything you want. It's just much, much healthier to see the spectrum of books that are coming out and have a reason to be a part of it. I see really forced stuff all the time from introverted fiction writers. And you'll just be better off if you deal with other people's stuff. Just make your
Go
part
outside,
of the reason.
take a
Yeah,
shower.
part of the reason you want to be a writer is to be a bigger person. And so picking up all that other material helps you get there.
And Parul, was your first job out of school Publishers Weekly?
It wasn't. I studied poli-sci, and I actually was in India working on some grassroots sort of development issues. It was awful. I just had to leave, and I started writing stories, and I applied for an MFA, did my MFA at Columbia, and after Columbia, went to Publishers Weekly, and learned a lot about the industry, review side, news side, went to NPR, and
But also you were writing and you got a lot of attention for your freelance pieces from award for the NBCC. So that's a perfect, that's a situation where the writing was fueling the editing jobs, right?
And I think it, for me at least, it keeps me honest because it keeps me. I just remember how hard it is. I'm editing a review. It's a lot better for me to realize that to write a good review is an immensely difficult thing. To write a good book is.
Great, Rob. You have an interesting background.
Yeah. I dropped out of grad school in Arizona where I was studying sports psychology and exercise physiology. And I moved here with $150. Took the cheapest apartment I could find in the Village Voice in 1986, which was a $90 share on Staten Island. And I worked in a postcard factory for a year. And then got an entry-level job at Random House in publicity, where I kind of figured out how publishing works and realized quickly that I hated publicity because I could not manufacture enthusiasm for things I was not enthusiastic about. So I started writing book reviews for Kirkus and anybody who would take me while I was at Random House, and I was sometimes doing like 7 a week just to build up clips. And Spy Magazine started at the time, and I went over to Spy Magazine where I was paid absolutely nothing, but I had a great time and got to write and make fun of people in power, and started writing for bigger and bigger places, including the Old Details magazine, which was then owned by Condé Nast. And at that time, it was the gay club kid magazine for straight people. If you know what I mean. And they didn't care what I wrote about as long as I wrote about books. And I wound up writing the regular book column every month for them, and I did that for 5 years. And literally, I could write about anything because my editors were illiterate. And they really, it's like I showed them the book cover. They were great. It's a book. So I championed all sorts of I was literally the only person to write about Donald Lantern when his first book came out. It was a great gig, and but I just kept building clips until I got to the point of details, and then I started writing for Vogue and Spin and any Times Book Review. And then I started Tin House in 1998. But I want to add that because of my background, I feel strongly about paying your dues, and I always hire from within. All my editors were interns. I always promote from within, and part of the process. So like, you know, being a volunteer, being a reader for a literary magazine is just a great way. If you really want to be in this kind of industry, it's a great way to kind of get in it, get to meet the people, get your foot in the door of, you know, this ecosystem. And if you pay your dues and you're, you know, a good person, you know, you will rise if you are persistent and don't leave. You know,
And if
it's
someone's
like-
interested right now in Tin House, are you open for interns, are you
Yeah.
open for readers?
Yeah, I'm always looking for readers because, as I said, I get 20,000 submissions a year. And all the guidelines are on the website, tinhouse.org. And I should say we have offices in both Portland, Oregon, and New York City. So.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a few more questions and then we're gonna open it up if you guys have questions. Okay, so we're talking a lot about how to get assignments for book reviews, so I'm curious from an editor's standpoint, what do you look for in book reviews? What are, you know, what's important to you? And as a journalism teacher who teaches book reviews, I usually go with what's normally like the New York Times style, which would be a third person review, because we do personal essays in class, but so most of the book reviews that I teach and that I publish myself are third person, and they tend to have you know, like a interesting provocative lead and then a short recap of what the book is, a little bit about the author, and then opinion. And I feel like opinion is really important there. Could you talk about, for example, Luke for Bomb? Are you guys also open for first person? And is there anything that differs from what I said that you would say to people that might want to pitch you or just write a book review and try for Bomb?
Definitely open to first person. Various persons are fine with me. One of my newer writers that's been she's probably wrote 4 or 5 pieces for me at this point. Always writes book reviews with a very personal angle to them. So she'll recap sort of elements of her life and how they relate to her, you know, reading of the book. And so it was been really interesting to read those because they're different than anything else that I get from most of the reviewers. That being said, I'm normally not that into that much recapping of the book. Some of my favorite reviews aren't really even reviews, they're more critical essays that discuss some of the ideas in the book and how they relate in more of a comparative literature sort of frame of mind, or how they relate to perhaps a school of philosophy or something like that. So I bet, I'm pretty sure there's been at least 1 or 2 book reviews that you come away from reading it where you do want to read the book, but you might still have no idea what it's about, and I'm okay with that. Yeah, so that's.
Michael, what about your book forum?
Yeah, Rob already said this, but I think that's, I really just like to be surprised by a review. And I don't quite know how that happens, and if I did, I probably would be surprised. But I mean, I think that that's the case. You know, that's true. And I also like to feel that the writer is being surprised too. I mean, I don't really know how to convey that either, but I do like to have the sense that a writer is working out ideas in the process of writing the piece. So yeah, that's.
It seemed like the Time Out reviews were sort of more formulaic because they were so short, because they're like 150, 200 words.
They were 330 words to be
But
exact.
then they got smaller though, didn't they?
Yeah, maybe.
So
But yeah, they were very well.
So
they
that's
were
sort of
the longer
formulaic, and
the
then they
longer
were mostly
pieces
third
were like
person.
800 words, and the short capsule reviews were 330 words. And yeah, they were very formulaic, and it tended to be 3 paragraphs.
And third person and.
Yeah.
But so with book forum, how long are you have much longer?
There are all sorts of. I mean, there are multiple. You know, some of them are 700, some of them are 1,000, some of them are 1,800, some of them are 2,500. It's sort of all over the map. And first person is fine. I mean, it's just if it works, I'm absolutely fine with it.
David?
I would say we probably are less open to first person than other publications, but I think there's a thing that we are very interested in expressive writing, and there's a way of writing that where your sensibility comes through and even your personality comes through, but it's not in the first person. And I think that in some ways is a very hard thing to kind of master. I do think, for whatever reason, British publications do it a lot better than American publications. And there's something in the water, or I don't know. And so I would say, you can pick up, I guess the Financial Times would be the easiest around here that has that style of writing, or read The Guardian online. It's a thing, it's a trick, and it can be learned and sort of developed, and pieces can be rewritten. You can start with yourself in there and take yourself out. And then, the other thing I think is that it's very hard to, I feel that reviews before you start and here's what I think about this book phase, at least for us, you have to sort of make sure that you're doing a fair service to the reader and to the book, and that you sort of, delivered a down payment that says, in our case, you probably do want to know what is in this book. And then when you get to the point where, especially if you're going to criticize it, one of the hardest things to do is to fairly and accurately characterize the opinion or, expression of someone that you disagree with. And so a very common mistake is that you kind of get in your own way, because you don't take the time to sort of clearly express, this is what this author, is trying to say, because you're so concerned to sort of say what he's wrong.
John from Brooklyn Rail.
Most of these venues have basically the same structure. It's basically the same structure if you're looking at watching a TV show, if you're reading a short story, if you're watching a commercial. It's a Western structure, and it's very, very similar. There's going to be wiggle room in that. At the Rail, I just really don't want to see synopsis. I don't want to pay to print it. The other thing is that at its best, the Rail is cool and smart, and at its worst, it's snarky and academic. And as much as possible, I want to veer away from snarky and academic.
You actually said, we talked about it, that you tone down reviews and that you feel that it's inappropriate, especially for someone that's never written a review, to say a tree should not have been cut down for this book, and you don't like this sarcastic.
I like it. I don't mind if people are critical of the book, but I want them to be able to back it up. And I do think it's part of editorial to when a review comes to you, to push people if they're going crazy, if it's a crazy rave, or if it's a crazy rant, and say, can you back this up? To challenge them on those points. I do feel like a better editor will bring a really negative review slightly more to the middle, and a really positive review slightly more to the middle, because as Michael was talking about, or maybe David, the reviewer will often sort of put a little bit too much of him or herself into the review, and you want to make sure that it's as a reviewer, you want to be sure that it's the writer's problem that you're writing about, and not your problem.
So, Parul, anything? You've worked at so PW, NPR, and now the Times. So, what makes a good review for you?
I have so much to add, except that I tend to like reviews that have an argument. If you like a review, persuade me to like it. If you like a book in your review, it should persuade me to like that book. If you dislike it, I should be on your side. And we have any number of rhetorical devices and evidence from the book to do that. And I just like the shape that gives a review. Again, like everybody else, I don't necessarily like a lot of recapping. I understand that it's necessary at various points, but yeah, again, I also personally am not a huge fan of manifestos, masquerading reviews. I don't really like author takedowns. I really like each book to be judged by itself. I don't want to overly read. I genuinely tend not to like reviews that Sadie Smith is this kind of person, Martin Amis is this kind. I like reviews that seem to take each book with humility.
And you've written reviews for a lot of publications also. So.
Yeah,
I think, I want to echo what Michael's saying. I think all of us up here can sense when you have preconceived notions about a book that you're reviewing. I think to have honest intellectual engagement with a book is your first criteria. Like if you come at it going, I hate this, without even looking at it, I think, you've got a problem. And it comes through in the text. And that said, I'm mainly talking about Lost and Founds in my section, and I love, it's very voice driven. And my essays are very voice driven, so there is a lot of I in there and a lot of opinion. And like the Lost and Founds, I also like things that are really kind of off the rails and different sometimes. Like I did a Lost and Found that was looking at the annotations in a book by an 8th grader. Like it was obviously, the kid had written his name in 8th grade in the school in it, and the author of the Lost and Found had found it in a used bookstore, and so he was trying to decipher the marginalia in there, and it was Shakespeare, and they were like, the marginalia were like gangster girls, exclamation point, just like completely really hilarious marginalia, and it was kind of a roundabout way to get at the text.
Great, so my last question will be just advice that the panelists could give to people here, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And I've already heard a lot of great suggestions, which sounds to me writing a whole piece on spec, just writing the piece itself and making it brilliant. A lot of times that often will work. And I think Rob mentioned Kirkus Reviews and Publishers Weekly, which are they do tons of book reviews, and they tend to pay $20 each, but it's a great way to get started. Any other advice that you could give for people that want to, that maybe don't have clips, that want to get rolling? So Luke, you said that Bob would be open to material. Would you be more open if somebody just wrote a whole piece versus pitched you something if they don't have clips? And any other advice for somebody that wants to get into book reviewing or feature writing?
I would love to get a perfectly formed piece where I have to change one comma and then we publish it. But honestly, my main advice is don't be afraid to send it in, and that it's not going to be perfect, and that's fine. And you can, of course, edit it yourself, but that's my job to work with you and help make it better. So don't keep on holding on to a piece that you think you want to submit and just never submit it.
By the way, for BOM, they do all kinds of other, they're open to all kinds of other writing. Is there anything in particular that somebody might want to try sending in or pitching you guys?
Yeah, we have an art editor, so she actually just started this week. So if you want to write about gallery shows, things like that. We also have some dance pieces and some film pieces that go up from time to time, and the occasional music piece, but that's sort of carefully curated. Our web editor has a certain taste in music he likes to cover, but yeah, that's about it.
Good.
Yeah, I think I don't think that there's anything I haven't really said. I do think that it's important to be able to sort of step outside of the book a little bit. And I do sometimes feel like pitches are a little bit hermetic in terms of you should really cover this book because it's a brilliant coming-of-age story, and I just sometimes I want to know why I should care, and it's not even that I don't care. I just sort of want to know why the writer thinks I should care, or why the writer thinks other people should care. So yeah, I think that's.
And art forum's open for art reviews also?
I don't really commission for art forum, but yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, thinking about the idea of sending a fully formed piece, that for the journal that's probably not a good idea. But a sort of larger theme of some of the things here is that not being afraid to do the work, to put the work forward, because you might, for the journal, you might read a book and write a pitch based on the fact that you've read the book, and to sort of put that effort into it really is surprisingly susceptible you know, this trade is surprisingly susceptible to hard work, and there are a lot of very smart people who, you know, can't quite do the hard work that some other people do. And reviewing, and you don't come across an occasion where you are reviewing a book and you discover, I have to read this other book. This piece is due in 2 days, and I've just realized that I have to, you know, nail down what I want to say here, and that means I have to go read a whole, you know, other book, and to read around the subject in that way, then you're not necessarily doing it right, I would say, because ultimately you don't want to do it for the money. It's not very lucrative at any level, but it's really the sort of it's a great way to intellectually engage with the culture, and so you might as well do that, you know, with all of your effort, and it will pay dividends in terms of the pieces you're writing as well.
You know, most of so much has already been covered, and I'm trying to think if there's anything really strategic I could suggest. And I would suggest maybe to have sort of two fronts. One, where you the stuff that you're really interested in, that you're going to write about, find a place it fits in your time. It's very important to just have some pieces. You know, this David Wojnarowicz biography came out. I was going to write about that. I didn't care if it was going up somewhere where they weren't going to give me a dime. I was going to do a major. I was going to give a major look to that book. And then on the other side, when you're trying to build your clips or whatever, to have sort of a front there of books that interest you, that you're pitching and looking at. But it is important to have sort of a thread of reviews that are very clearly things that you were going to do no matter what. I think editors respect it, and it gives you some sort of backbone.
I think maybe 2 points. I think, and I'm sure everybody here knows how many resources there are and how many places there are for lawyers to sort of try things out. Millions. There's so many places.
Well, name some that people might not have heard about. The Millions is a good
the
place.
Rumpus. I'm sure
The
everybody here.
Rumpus.
Extra Time,
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, all like.
And you said that as an editor at the Times, you're looking at some of the
all
smaller
the
places to
time,
look
all
for
the
good
time, trying to
places.
find somebody who
Okay, that's great.
Yes, for nonfiction. So there's that, and I think secondly, this is more just. I think this is just too general for my own sanity. I think it's really important to keep trying other kinds of writing at the same time, just because book reviews at whatever length they can start feeling incredibly formative, incredibly rote, and books are too important for us to write reviews. So to continue trying and continue practicing, it's very important. It's how you can.
Great, Rob.
My biggest piece of advice, I think, is divorce your ego from the process. So that means if you really want to do this, you're going to get rejected. Everybody up here gets rejected. You know, no matter what level you're at, you're going to get rejected. You know, I worked at the New Yorker for a while, and when I was there, we assigned twice as many pieces that ran. So, you know, even people on contract were turning pieces in, and they weren't timely by the time they came in, so they were killed. You know, they were on contract, you know, whatever. And I saw a lot of people who were getting their big break, they're doing their first big piece at the New Yorker, and it's killed. You know, the people who persisted and went, oh, you know, that really sucks, and then, you know, got back up and did it again. Those are the ones who are still around. You know, you have to build that into the equation that you're going to get rejected. You're not going to get your emails returned sometimes. I don't get my emails returned sometimes. You know, it happens. We're all busy. Things fall through the cracks. You can't take it personally. You just have to persist and keep going and going. And as far as like divorcing your ego from the process, when you're feeling passionate and creative, right? If you're feeling like cleaning the house and, you know, doing your taxes, that's when you send out your pitches. Like if you're in an organizational mood, be systematic, you know, target the places you want. If you're feeling creative, channel all that energy into being creative and doing your creative work. Because when you cross the two, the rejection is personal. It can feel personal that your opinions are getting rejected, your work is getting, shut down, where it's just, we all reject things for a million different reasons, and not out of spite.
Great, and I have two pieces of advice. I love when David and John were talking about it. Rob, just write, and I absolutely believe in that, and I have 8 books out, and I think every single book, I just wrote the whole book. And there were stages where a lot of people would say, write a proposal, and I can't write what I'm gonna be writing. It just is never, it never works. Or an editor says, this is nice, but it's never gonna, where are you gonna go from here? It's never gonna work. And then I just write the whole thing, and then it just works. So I absolutely love that. Just write if you believe in it. But I also do think, and as Rob said, aside from writing, it's also brilliant to come out to panels like this and to meet editors and to join organizations like the NBCC, where we have tons of events where there's fantastic editors coming, and you can meet the authors, and you can meet editors and agents and people that are out there doing it. So I think it's actually, the way I love to do it is sort of write by day obsessively, and then go out at night and try to meet editors and agents and other authors who are older and smarter who I could listen to. And my shrink actually had therapy help too, but my shrink actually had good advice, which is he said, hang out with people you want to be. And luckily around New York area, you can do that every night. Anyway, so now we can open it up for questions. So if anybody has a question, don't be shy, and why don't you say your name and what your question is? Yes.
Hi, I actually do have some clips. I've written some book reviews.
What's your name?
My name is Makata.
Okay.
I just graduated from Columbia. I guess a couple of questions I have are the clips that we send with our pictures. Do you read those clips? Like, okay, you take time to read them. Okay. And I haven't done a book reviews for a long time, but for a couple of years. But I just got a how-to book, like an advanced how-to book, and I've had do you all publish reviews of how-to books, or exactly how would you approach?
You just missed the Times Book Review had a whole a special section on how-to books.
Okay, because
in general, most places don't.
Yeah,
but
right.
But they happen to have a really interesting special issue. When was that? About 2 months ago.
Okay.
In general, they Publishers Weekly and Kirkus Reviews do, but I don't think does anyone else here do self, unless it's kind of like a Annie Lamott or somebody well known.
Okay, but have you ever accepted it? Except for a special issue, say just the angle or whatever, or you just don't deal with it at all?
You have to get special, really special.
Okay.
Like for example,
Yeah,
like the Wall Street Journal, you do like Freakonomics or something.
Yeah, we did. I mean, once it's sort of like there were a lot of good things in the Times How-To issue, but it's kind of like a stunt, And we did. I mean, I had the guy from MythBusters on the television show review a book called The Practical Pyromaniac about how to create fires in the backyard and do weird experiments. But it was like such an exception that it was just sort of a bit of a stunt.
Are you asking because you want to review books, or you want to get your book reviewed?
No, I got an advance of the book as a how-to book that I was trying to sell, get it in a publication. But a lot of
So you want to get press on your self-help book?
It's not my book. It's another person's book that I want to review.
You want to review
I would
it?
go for a specialized place, like
Yeah.
like a more, or
What's
a
the
blogs
subject? Because you
or-
might also want to do the subject. For example, if it's a Jewish author, then I would always pitch, then maybe there's that angle. If it's an Irish author, Jewish author would be Tablet or the Forward. An Irish author would be the Irish Times. Somebody from Detroit. So if there was ever a Detroiter that was the author of a book, I would go to the Detroit News or the Free Press, who might be interested in a profile or a Q&A. So you might have to be more creative.
Some of the bosses actually publish self-help books. They review like Self does, Magazine does,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Are you guys going to be sharing your email addresses?
You can email, and I have cards, so you can also email me and ask if anyone has questions. Did you want to?
Thanks for the candor and insight. The question sort of comes from having taken Sue's seminar a few weeks ago where you had discussion of a new column, the anxiety column in the Times. So for the panel, I'd like to know what incremental or seismic changes you might be seeing in your publications.
That's a good question. Good. So, Rob, anything changing with Tin House?
We're doing a lot more online. We're in the blog is just doing a lot more stuff.
Now, if I understand correctly, Tin House pays if you're in the hard copy, but they don't pay online. So would somebody have more of a shot if they said to you, "I would be thrilled if this was online"? Does that give them a better chance?
Yeah. And
Okay.
but we get a lot of pitches just specifically for the blog.
Okay. And that would be a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, and any of these things, like if you get into the blog, you just then therefore have the attention of the editors. Your foot is in the door. You've done something for free, but you've kind of paid the due, and then it's much easier to pitch other things to the print version if you're in. It's just also a way to say, I've been published by Tin House or whatever. Just anything that kind of builds your credibility, your clips.
Great. Parul, anything new going on at the book review? John?
The rail is a .org, so it's pretty steady.
Good. And David, how long has the standalone book section been at the Journal?
About 2 years.
And it seems to be expanding.
Yeah. I mean, I actually had something. It's something we're just dipping our toe into, but a bunch of other people will too, which is ebooks. We are still figuring out exactly how to cover them, and one of the interesting qualities, some of them are very short, and some of them spring into existence without being on advanced schedules, and it's an interesting area. And if I were out sort of beating the pavement, freelancing, I might think about how to do that to write about those for some different venues. Even though often they're like magazine articles, there's such a time intensity. Often, to say, hey, this just came out. I've got a copy. I'm going to write about it for you. And so, I think that's something that a lot of publications that are concerned about the timeliness will, they'll be interested in ebooks for the same reason, and trying to figure out how to cover them.
Michael, anything different or new going on at the Bookforum?
Well, I think the web will continue to grow, but I'm not exactly sure how. But it will. And ebooks, we don't cover. Well, we've covered a couple of ebooks online, but it's definitely something we'll be paying more attention to this time.
Luke, anything new going on with Bob?
Maybe the newest thing is the print magazine is now available in various digital formats.
Good. Other questions? We have time for a few more. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa. I've written for Bookforum and Braille and Panelists. My feed is sort of going global. Like I have a column being abroad in India and throughout the world. And I'm wondering if travel books or travel memoirs a popular pitching niche, or if it's a bad idea if I have a travel memoir myself to pitch for that.
It seems like there's a lot of books.
And there are also a lot of really interesting online kind of blog posts like Nowhere. Do you know Nowhere? It's kind of a collective of travel writers who are writing very personal essays about various locales, and it's kind of they're not service pieces. They're really travel-ish essays that are very specific. It's nowhere.com, but it's only online. But they publish really interesting stuff.
This is something we follow, the idea of the number of books in this genre coming out. But even pitching is like a roundup with, if you can thematically even link them, sometimes that can really help.
Like, for example, if there were 5 books by women traveling the world coming out, in a few months' time, that's a really good pitch.
Or like my Eat, Pray, Love piece. Would that be that's more of a good clip to include?
Oh, like she's writing about how she took a trip all over the world, and it was the Tighten Pray Love, and she didn't find love or a book deal. Yeah, you could put that with it. Good. Any final questions? Yes.
I'm Eric Anderson, and I'm just curious, how do you guys find the time to read everything? Even for I'll admit it, the things that I write for, I don't read everything that we do.
What do you write for?
Hunger Mountain, Electric Picture.
So how do you find
How do we find the time? I don't know. I mean, I read. I don't know. I mean, I'm not quite sure if I understand the question. Is the question do I read everything that I write about, or
How
that
do you find
everything
time
that I
to keep
cover?
up with? There's so many millions
The
of
books,
and magazines.
or other publications, or
I guess however you want to answer the question.
I mean, I feel like I'm constantly behind. If that helps, but I try to read as much as possible to remain like a responsible editor. And I'd say as a writer, I always read the book. You know, when I review.
I have a thing where I have to write by day and only read at night, because if I read something that especially if I love it, then I become that voice without meaning to. So for some reason, if I do all my work in writing by day, and then at night, for some reason, I don't steal as much or something. But I never, and John talked me into being on the board of the NBCC. Didn't tell me, like, okay, I thought 30 books a year are on the finalists, but he didn't tell me that we get sent 1,000 and that we have to pick the finalists. And so I'm there's books coming out of my ears, and I can never keep up with them. So, how do you?
I don't think anybody can. I think your job as an editor is to have a good enough lay of the land that, at least you're not completely
Yeah, you also develop a real instinct for what you're going to read. And you can tell a page or two, like, at least me, I'm not just.
I mean, I think it's something that's true if you're not an editor too, if you're a writer, that you can be so concerned with keeping up that you don't develop. It's hard to find time to read a bunch of things that aren't a quote for work. Or if you're pitching books, you can spend all of your time pitching new books that are coming out and not really, sort of just develop your natural interests in a couple of areas. And so,
Yeah, what's saving
worth
me
worrying
now
about.
is I'm on the committees for poetry, which of course is pages, and memoir, because that's really, I just adore memoir. And so I will read within the other categories. If somebody who I really trust says, this is amazing, you have to read it, I will, but I really try to narrow it down because I just can't keep up otherwise. But is there more questions? Yes.
There's been a lot of time I just listened. There's been a lot of chatter online about studies, both formal and informal, about the lack of minority writers that are being reviewed. And not everyone studies that a lot of the minority writers are now. And Roxanne Trumpus did something that I think 67% of most reviews are by white authors. So I'm wondering when you guys are looking at pitches, or you, I don't know the journey where from backing it, but if there's some sort of greater interest in books being reviewed by authors of color or
Good question.
authors.
Rob, you actually told my class something fascinating.
Yeah, I actually, we were part of the VITA numbers breakdown, so it caused us to break down our own submission numbers and our acceptance numbers. What we found was that, particularly Lost and Found, that it was pretty much close to 50-50 female male writers, but the subjects were 8 out of 10 male. So that means that men and women were picking males to change. So, that the subject, it was kind of self-selecting, skewing towards
Did you say
female.
it was that in terms of the amount of people who get rejected who come back to you? Didn't you say that?
Our whole numbers
Fascinating.
were 100% of males I solicit submit work, 33% of females. And this is even for women I've published before, saying, send me your next story, and only a third of the time they won't. And part of it, I think, is entitlement. Like males will write something on a napkin and give it to me and say, work with this. Whereas someone, like, I'm married to a fiction writer, and she will not release something until it's, like, airtight. Even if someone's asking, like, we need a story for this anthology, she'll let the deadline go rather than like something out of her hands. So the lesson for that is, yeah, I am really looking for it, and I've stopped basically soliciting them because I'll get 8 pitches walking out into the elevator, and I solicit a lot more time. And I also travel. Really active book work.
It's interesting. Far more by women than I men. I think a lot of business conference, and people of color and women pitch me all the time. I think it's also who you are also affects how people, the confidence people have to talk to you. So I mean, yeah, I think the Times was very harshly criticized and did very badly both media numbers and our science. It's something that I know that everyone is committed to. There's something that is incredibly important and not in a capitalistic way. I think it's because I think more people who know color, queer people, know interesting things about power, know interesting things about narrative. And yeah, so I don't feel like I'm checking the box. It's stories I'm interested in.
All right, I'll tell you something upbeat, which is that about 50% of the students in my journalism classes, my 15-week journalism classes, get published. A lot of them are here. And I would say that, especially in the New York Times, which has a bunch of great essay columns, which is the Townies, Anxiety, Modern Love, Lives, and the op-ed first person, I would say that, let's see, last term out of 12 people that got published, I think 9 were either women or of color. So I actually think that editors looking for essays, like just for example, Modern Love gets tons more pieces by women. Maybe that's a cliche because it's relationship stuff, but that's a half a page in the style section, and half of them turn into book deals. In fact, right back, if you one of my students, Aspen, did a beautiful piece for the Modern Love, and then got editors and agents calling her. So luckily, for some reason, with essays, I would say maybe because editors are looking for that they're looking for more unusual, interesting stories, first-person stories, or that women are more revealing, or people of color might have more unusual stories. But I would say that in terms of selling first-person essays, it's the opposite.
It's because I think editors are having to we're up against a lot of entrenched sexism in the publishing industry. So how many women are getting published, especially nonfiction, which is my category at the Times, and it's really, really interesting to see like it's about 80% in the social science.
And also, what are the expectations of those editors going by there? So that you're looking at a narrower pool of stuff to pitch, some of which is has been more shared.
But on the other hand, don't use it as an excuse to not write, because like I'm hogging all the space because I have 8 books and I'm working on 3 more and I'm not going to stop. And so in a way, so if you're a little more aggressive, then there's more room for you. So don't use the fact that you're not seeing as many books for women as a reason to not write it or not push.
I think you gotta find the books and pitch them.
Champion the books that you believe are stronger.
But you pitch books by women too. I mean, it's a self-perpetuating system, and also, my wife is part of this group. She writes the book column for Vanity Fair, and she's part of a group of women that kind of have consciously are using masculinist language to review women, because male reviewers tend to gush about male books, especially in fiction, saying, it's the greatest thing since, Great Gatsby. I mean, there's just this sort of, mutual appreciation society, and women are a little more, tend to be a little more measured, and there's like, my wife and her circle are kind of trying to fight back against that.
Great. All right. So let's ask everybody what we have going on, especially for the Brooklyn Book Festival, which is Sunday, or anything else coming up. So Rob, tell us. You're doing a bunch of events. You said.
Just one. I'm introducing
Wilson Whitehead and Joyce Carol's.
Great, other people?
I'll be there.
Other
I have a
people
booth.
have events or books coming up or anything interesting they wanna mention?
Yeah, I'm doing a panel on money and fiction with Christian Lorenzen, Clancy Martin, and Ruth Kickoff.
What time is that?
What'd you go to that?
Buddy Rob.
What time is that?
Feminist Rob. It's 2:30.
Great, anybody else? And if anybody's interested, I have a bunch of cards and you can email me. I have a bunch of classes and seminars coming up, but also Michael, John, and I are all on the board of the National Book Critics Circle, and it's an amazing organization. And just for $15, students and associates can join, and you get on all our lists, and you get to come to events and stuff like that. So we want to thank Erica Stone and Jasmine and everybody at the Barnes & Noble Park Slope. And remember, when you buy any books today, say that you're going it's the book fair that benefits Penn Emergency Writers Fund. And we want to thank the Brooklyn Book Festival for co-sponsoring, and especially thank the fantastic panelists. So.